8, now at just 48-44 on the campaign. Dari Payro's tied with me at 48-44 there as well after a 3-8 week a week ago. Mike Griffith was a winner overall last week at 6-5, and now dead even, flat-footed 500 on the season at 46-46. Jeff Sentell 3-8, 41-51. He'll bring up the rear at least for right now. And Dari, since you and I are tied, I'll ask you. Last week, not an easy slate of games to pick, but sometimes that's what makes it fun. Although, admittedly, it would have been a little bit more fun to be on the other side of a couple of those results last weekend.
Yeah, brutal. November's been brutal every year. It just these college games kind of shift. Tough to pick. This week's tough too. This week's pretty hard.
Yeah, for sure. You're measuring motivation, you're measuring health, you're measuring a lot of things here. And obviously, if you're following our picks all season long, for the most part, you are still heading to the pay window more often than not. But we got to get back on that horse and make sure that stays true again for this week there as well, because after all, that is what it's all about. And of course, if you've never played before with us, here's how it works. We're going to give our thoughts on the upcoming weekend's games. We'll pick them against the spread. We'll hear from Mike Griffith and Jeff Sentell and Connor Riley, Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers. They will weigh in there as well. I'll share my thoughts. After that, a consensus is formed. And then Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews decides if he wants to go with the flow and join that consensus, or if he wants to go the other direction. Always makes for a spirited conversation. We'll encourage you, as we said before, to play along with us there. And of course, it's all brought to you by our friends at R.S. Andrews, the ones you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time and do work that's promised for the price is promised. Right now, you're thinking about that heating system, long, cold winter coming up. Before it starts, before the holiday season gets here, go ahead and get that thing tuned back up to factory fresh specs and maybe breathe some new life into an old system. That's what R.S. Andrews can do for you. All right, Georgia on Saturday gets ready to take on Charleston Southern, the Buccaneers out of the Big South Conference. To be completely honest, this was not an easy point spread to find anywhere. It's not commonly available, so we're going to use the best thing that we have here, but you should certainly consult wherever it is that you look in on these kinds of things, BetUS or whatever you're familiar with, wherever you are, to kind of figure out if this game's even available for you to get action down on. But we're going to operate with this as a 54.5-point number. Georgia favored against Charleston Southern. Mike, on Saturday, go ahead and start us off. Dogs versus the Bucks here.
Yeah, BA, I think about some of the weaker opponents, FCS teams Georgia's played in the past. And I think, Kirby Smart doesn't mind playing these teams, but he also knows that he's paying them. So if you're going to pay these guys, you're going to get your money's worth. I'm going to take Georgia to cover the spread against, I keep wanting to call them College of Charleston, but it's Charleston Southern. I think they got about 3,000 students.
So, Mike, on the side of Georgia, minus a gigantic number here. Jeff, what do you think? Dogs minus what we're going to call 54.5. Jeff is muted. Jeff, you're muted.
I want to use some of the phrasing some of my colleagues have used this year, and that is, I don't really feel good about this one. I don't know about this one. I'm going to make this pick, but I don't love it. I'm going to pick Georgia to cover here, but I really don't love it. I mean, you're going to have to see a lot of touchdowns from Dejon Edwards, the defense, third string, fourth string quarterbacks for this to happen. I think Savon Clark, perhaps, just a big number. Thankfully, all my film study of North Carolina A&T, East Carolina, Robert Morris, and the like has allowed me the chance to pick somewhat confidently for Georgia to cover this one.
So both of our scribes thus far on the side of the Dogs, minus 54.5. Connor Riley, what do you think? Connor is also muted. We're off to a rousing start here today.
Got muted there somehow, and Jeff is now muted again. I'll take Georgia here. This team isn't very good. Not the Georgia team, obviously. They're the best team in the country. And I think they're going to want to put on a show for their seniors. They're going to play a lot of their older guys well into the game to give them some real meaningful minutes and real meaningful moments. So give me Georgia here.
So a lot of Georgia thus far. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they agree. 94% take Georgia minus the points. I won't spend a long time on this, but I was just a little bit curious of what even is Charleston Southern. I wanted to try to find a little bit more about that. They are in the Big South Conference, as I mentioned a moment ago. They're 4-5 on the season. They are 3-4 in their conference. Also, you may remember the old BCS formula. There was the Sagarin ratings. Jeff Sagarin does those. I wanted to see where Charleston Southern fell on the Sagarin ratings. I was just kind of curious more than anything else. there are 258 teams rated by Sagarin. Charleston Southern's actually 158. For a little context here, Vanderbilt's 150. So they're actually not that far away from Vanderbilt. And they are a spot ahead of UConn, a team that obviously went down to the wire with Vandy a little earlier this season. So do with that what you will. By comparison, Tennessee played Tennessee Tech earlier this season. They're like 228 or something like that. So there are FCS teams worse than Charleston Southern. I'm not quite so sure the distinction makes much of a difference for Georgia on Saturday. Bottom line is, just on principle alone, I'm not taking any team as a 54.5 point favorite. I'm not quite so sure I'd take the Pittsburgh Steelers by that number against Charleston Southern. I'm just always going to take the points when the points are this high. And I really have no reason to justify that other than the high variance that comes from a high point spread game. So I'll take Charleston Southern plus the 54.5. Just going to sound funny to say out loud and go against the grain, but the flow is clearly on the side of the dogs here, minus the huge number. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take UGA?
Yeah, I am. It's just crazy to even think about a number this big, but Georgia's 7-3 against the spread on the year. So yeah, I'll take him here to cover the number, even if the backups play.
Yeah, I mean, y'all very well be right about that. I don't have a great argument for not going against Georgia here. It's just kind of a principle thing. That many points, I usually go the other direction on that. Normally I say we'll return to Georgia before all said and done. Honest truth is I couldn't even really find an over under. Dari said he found one at one point in time, but there really is not a commonly available over under for this game there on Saturday. But we'll maybe give you a final thought on UGA before we wrap things up. Instead, let's go to a much better, much more competitive game, and a game that still has some implications on the postseason race here as Alabama gets ready to host an Arkansas team that has certainly been impressive in year two for Sam Pittman, but the stiffest test since playing Georgia a few weeks ago will come Saturday when the Hogs go on the road to Alabama. Alabama, though, is still a sizable home favorite. 21 points is the number here. Alabama hosting Arkansas. Mike Griffith, will start with you. What do you think about the Crimson Tide as a 3-touchdown favorite against Sam Pittman?
Yeah, I think Alabama is starting to play championship football, as Will Anderson said. I think the Tide is recognized. It's November. This is usually a good time for Alabama. And Arkansas was pretty fortunate at LSU. Just some really bad quarterback play by the Tigers late. And I do think Sam Pittman would be my pick for SEC Coach of the Year right now if Kirby Smart doesn't get it. But I think Alabama is going to put a dent in the Hogs. So give me Alabama, and I'll take 45-10, Alabama over Arkansas.
Jeff Sentell, what do you think? Bama minus 21.
Yeah, I think a lot of my misses this year have probably been misreads on the Fighting Pittmans. I just boiled this one down in terms of I think Arkansas can I don't think Alabama will be able to run the ball on Arkansas. I saw what Arkansas has done so far this year, holding teams under 100 yards on the ground. And I think back to Alabama only had like 10 yards or something on the ground against LSU. I think Alabama's going to win, but I'm thinking it's going to be inside that number. I'm going to take these points, and I'm going to roll with Arkansas on this one.
So a split decision thus far. Connor, break the tie.
Yeah, interesting to note about Alabama. They only have two healthy running backs right now in Brian Robinson and Trey Sanders, and so they're really going to lean heavily here on Robinson if they're going to run the ball in this game. Arkansas's defense does invite rushing looks, but you know what? I'm gonna go against my judgment here, and I'm sure BA's got the stats of when Alabama is between a 2 and 3 touchdown favorite, which they are here. Give me Sam Pittman and the Hogs to at least make this a little bit interesting on Saturday.
That's interesting. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they are on the side of Pittman just slightly, 55%. Do take the Hogs here. They typically go with Arkansas there on that. And Connor's right that the numbers here call for Alabama because this is that zone in which Alabama is typically very dominant. But here's the thing I can't quite shake, Connor, and I can't quite shake this to anybody else who's listening right now, is I'm not quite so sure how much recent trends really factor into this Alabama discussion here this year. We've seen this team fail to cover in some high-profile spots. The LSU game a couple of weeks ago, obviously the Florida game there on the road. I just don't quite know what to make of this Alabama team right now. Mike said that they flipped the switch here in November, but I'm not sure that's the case, given the fact the last time we saw them against a real opponent was 2 weeks ago against LSU, and they were lucky to actually win that game. Forget the point spread. They were just simply lucky to win it. So I don't have a great feeling about this one way or another because I'm not really quite sure what the shape of Alabama is. It simply comes down to me on which side am I more comfortable being wrong on. expecting Alabama playing well at home is just an opinion. I'm just more comfortable. If I end up being wrong on that, I'm more comfortable being wrong on that side than I am the other. 21 is a huge spread. I would never bet this game. I wouldn't take a free ticket on it, I don't believe. But I'll take Alabama here minus the 21. And boy, I really don't feel good about that. That puts the flow on the side just slightly of Arkansas, though. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Hogs?
No, I'm taking Bama. They've covered 10 of their last 14 SEC games. It's senior day. They got 14 seniors. A lot of them start, and the rest of them kind of are in a rotation. I expect them to handle business and get this cover.
I'm glad that you feel comfortable about it, confident in it. Obviously, you've been comfortable with Alabama for quite some time. I just can't be quite so sure what this Alabama team is as of yet, but nonetheless, interesting pick there.
I'm more confident in Alabama than I am with the Fighting Pittmans. With them covering games. I like the way they play, but they've kind of been all over the map this season.
Yeah, I think the other thing you got to be careful of here, and I thought about this last week with the two Mississippi schools, and it turned out not to really be the case, is when you hang that mission accomplished banner. For Arkansas, they've gotten lauded for having a good season. They're in the top 25 now for the second consecutive week. At a certain point, do they, just cash in their chips and say mission accomplished? And you wonder if that hurts them in a game like this against Alabama, but we'll have to wait and see. We shift our attention now to Columbia, Missouri, a game that's more interesting than I think we probably thought it would be. You want to go back a few weeks ago, a Missouri team that was terrible, but suddenly playing a little bit better, including earning a win against South Carolina this past week against a Florida team that's reeling, where you got to feel like Dan Mullen's already maybe got 1 foot out the door. He could literally be fired. Embarrassing effort against Samford, and then an embarrassing celebration that followed that. One more loss, I think, ends the career for Mullen there at Florida, and it certainly could come against Missouri on Saturday. Maybe somewhat surprisingly to some, Florida's still a pretty big favorite in this game. Missouri getting 8.5 at home in Como after winning a week ago. Mike, what do you think about Florida's 8.5-point favorite on the road here in SEC play?
Yeah, there's a few thoughts on this. The night Butch Jones was fired, I remember watching him walk off the field by himself after losing a game at Missouri in November. And I didn't know he was fired at the time. The drums had been beaten, but I thought, boy, that's a beaten man right there. This isn't going to be good. Then I got the call the next morning and filed a story from the St. Louis airport breaking the news that Butch Jones had been relieved of his duties. So there was that thought that went through my mind. I was on the SEC teleconference this week and asked Dan Mullen about how he handles all the scrutiny and pressure right now. I really liked his answer. I liked it enough that even though everything suggests we should take Missouri, yeah, I'm going to take Florida. Dan Mullen had me in that moment when he talked about controlling the controllables. I'm going to go with the Gators. Surprise myself here. Gators cover.
All right, Jeff, what do you think? Florida minus 8.5 on the road at Missouri.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a game that anybody that likes to see recollections of the 85 Bears come to mind. I think there will be very little defense played in this one. I think that Florida will still find a way to athlete and ball play its way to win this game, but I think it will be inside that number. The number's 8.5. I'm going to go Missouri on this one.
All right, so split decision. Connor, your chance to break that tie once again.
Yeah, I think taking Missouri this week is kind of a sucker's pick. Florida did score 70 points last week. I think this offense has found something in Emory Jones, and there's some real confidence. Granted, it's Samford. But I know it's on the road. You wonder about what the weather might be like there and how that might impact the game. It was cold in Columbia, South Carolina a few weeks ago when Florida pretty clearly quit. But Mike made a lot of interesting points, and I just feel like taking Missouri is such a square pick here. So give me Florida minus 8.5.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers disagree with you. They're on the side of Missouri. They never take Florida. 81% do like Missouri here in this spot. And if it's a square play, I'll be Uma Thurman again. I'll give you the square, whatever it is that she does in Pulp Fiction. The fact of the matter is Florida right now is just not good enough to be favored by 8.5 points against anybody, not even maybe Samford from a week ago. And
wait a minute, BA, you're saying they don't – come on, man. Samford, they didn't deserve that?
Pretty quietly, Missouri's actually playing a little better football too. Now, this is more of a pick against Florida than it is a pick on Missouri, but they're clearly running the ball better now than they have before. And you know what? They're playing slightly better defense. They didn't play defense at all, early in the season, but they didn't relative to expectations and played terrible against Georgia and actually took some of that with them in the game against South Carolina a week ago. I actually like Missouri here a lot. I don't think this is as squarish as Connor does. I think this may be a dusty line, looking at an older version of Florida, not quite what the current team is. I could live to regret saying that, but once again, I just feel a lot more comfortable being against this Florida team right now. So I'll gladly take Missouri, and by a small margin, that puts the flow on the side of Missouri there as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Mizzou?
Yeah, I'm going to take Mizzou at home. I mean, Florida's the better team as far as talent, but it just seems like they've taken the rest of this year off or kind of lost their focus and everything else. Being a road favorite by 8.5 is too much for me to lay money on them. So I'll take Missouri at home. I think it'll be a lot of scoring back and forth. No defense in this game.
So another interesting game in the SEC we'll turn our attention to now, the aforementioned South Carolina Gamecocks that could not capitalize on the momentum from winning against Florida 2 weeks ago at Missouri last week. Get a chance to come back home now and deal with the suddenly reeling Auburn team after Auburn lost Mississippi State and also lost quarterback Bo Nix for the year. That's the clear headline there. For two first-year coaches, I actually find this to be a pretty fascinating game, but maybe I'm just kind of dork that would. But nonetheless, South Carolina host Auburn. Auburn's still a 7.5-point favorite here going to Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday. Mike, what do you think about Beamer versus Harsin here in the battle of first-year coaches with the Gamecocks getting 7.5 at home?
Yeah, I know the mojo here would seem to favor South Carolina at home. We've talked about that being a tough place to play, and Auburn losing Bo Nix and their kicker. But Brian Harsin's impressed me. I feel like Auburn is a resilient football team. There's a lot of pride there. That's not a program that often quits. And so I'm going to say the more talented team wins, and maybe they even get a little bit of extra energy out of having a new quarterback. Sometimes teams perform better for one quarterback than the other. So I'm going to take Auburn here.
So that's Mike on the side of the Auburn Tigers plus the points, or I should say minus the points on the road. Jeff, what do you think about Auburn in South Carolina?
I'm going to call it not a square pick, but a zigzag pick. Let's go follow the plot point here. No Bo Nix. Finley was great last year for LSU against South Carolina. Auburn's still the better team. South Carolina could not run the ball last week against awful Missouri. Give me Auburn in this one. I think Auburn's going to win this one.
All right. So there you go on that. A little bit of – so you took Auburn minus the points here?
Yes.
Okay. So a little Auburn love here thus far. Connor, are you going to join in that?
Nope. I don't know if South Carolina is going to win this game, but boy, oh boy, when you blow a 28-3 lead and lose well into the fourth quarter, that's tough to come back from a mentality standpoint. You lose your starting quarterback, you lose your starting kicker, as Mike pointed out there, which I think could be rather important for the line in this game. So I don't know if South Carolina is going to outright win. They fought back against Missouri last week in an impressive fashion, ultimately didn't get the win. But I like what I've seen from this South Carolina team, the fight that they display, whereas this Auburn team, I have questions about how much they're willing to fight this week. So give me the Gamecocks at home in Columbia.
So that is that. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, 61% on the side of South Carolina here. I'll also say this. There's a theory in gambling. It's called like the Stanford Wong theory, which is based on a teaser that if you have a chance to tease a 8-9 point number down below, like you get 6 points for the teaser, you go below a field goal, you go underneath two key numbers, that's going to be profitable over the course of the long haul. There's an expected value added for something like that, whereas most of the time teasers are not typically a pretty good play on that. 7.5 is a classic teaser opportunity because you're going underneath both the key number of 7 and the key number of 3 there. Just keep that in mind if you're thinking in that direction. I also went back and looked at some of the old data from when TJ Finley played a year ago for LSU, knowing that he played against South Carolina. He actually had good numbers against the Gamecocks a year ago. 17-21, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns and interception, and really did not have, generally speaking, bad numbers a year ago and getting a chance to play for LSU. So I think that Auburn could actually respond fairly well to his insertion in the game on Saturday. I think the problem, though, is they're just favored by too many points. So if it's possible to actually be somewhat intrigued to see how Finley plays, I am. But just at that price, I don't think you can argue for Auburn with a 7.5 point number. As I said before, you can tease that thing down to a low number, maybe feel better about that if you want to take Auburn. But in terms of the 7.5, I think the play there is on the side of South Carolina. Don't expect the Gamecocks to win the game outright, but 7.5 is just too many points for an Auburn team right now. It is reeling here a little bit. So I'll take South Carolina. It puts the flow slightly on the side of South Carolina as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Gamecocks back in a spot they're very comfortable at Williams-Brice Stadium.
War Eagle. No, I'm taking Auburn. No Bo Nix, no problem. Auburn's 11-5 against the spread in their last 16 games as a road favorite. I think that team will bounce back. I think their coach will get them fired up for this game, even with all the stuff that happened. They killed me last week, but I like them here.
Speaking of teams that once played Auburn, obviously Auburn got a big win a couple weeks ago against Ole Miss, but Ole Miss responded from that with going on the road, winning at Texas A&M last week, and now riding high, the chance to host Vanderbilt here. Big ranking next to their name, pretty stats connected to quarterback Matt Corral, and suddenly Lane Kiffin is once again the toast of the SEC, potentially even a candidate for a bigger job like a place like LSU. But more business to take care of here in 2021 before any of that is determined, including hosting Vanderbilt as a 36.5 point favorite on Saturday. Once again, huge number. Mike Griffith, what do you think about the Rebels minus 36 and a hook?
Yeah, this is pretty interesting here, Brandon. I'm going to call this the Stanford wrong theory, okay? Because earlier this year, Stanford was a 13-point favorite over Vanderbilt and covered. So you would think that I would go with Ole Miss, but this is where the wrong part comes in. Not the Stanford wrong theory, but the Stanford wrong theory. I think that theory would be wrong here because Vanderbilt has momentum. I know that probably sounds like an oxymoron unless we're talking bowling or baseball. But Vanderbilt actually outscored Kentucky in the second half. And I think that Ole Miss is a team I'm still not convinced they can handle the moment. And right now they're in the moment. And Vanderbilt has, I think, kind of been sticky for Ole Miss in the past. You gamblers know those numbers better than me. But I'm going to play a hunch and say that Vanderbilt keeps it close enough to cover the spread and apply the Stanford wrong theory.
Jeff, what do you think? Ole Miss minus 36.5 points.
I guess I'm going to ad lib here, and I'm going to call this the Mike wrong theory. And it's the Vanderbilt corollary. I think Ole Miss, as long as they don't have all 11 starters not practicing this week, as long as their fins on their land sharks aren't broken, I just think Ole Miss has played a little bit of defense. They have a huge win in their confidence play from going back past couple of weeks. I think Ole Miss will put up the points. The Kiffins are going to Kiffin, and they will cover.
So that is that split decision here. What do you think, Connor?
I'm going to break my one rule. I'm going to go Batman here. I'm going to take Vanderbilt this week because Ole Miss has a short week next week, and they're playing a physical Mississippi State defense that you're going to want to be healthy for and want to get right for. So I think this Vanderbilt team is going to get up big early, sort of like you saw Kentucky do a week ago. They were up 31-0 at halftime against Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt found enough in the second half to cover. I think that's the formula they're going to follow this week as Ole Miss, I think, gets up big early and then starts looking ahead to that Egg Bowl against Mississippi State.
So Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers don't agree with that. They're on the side of Ole Miss here. 78% do take Ole Miss to cover the number against Vanderbilt. I got to tell y'all, very quietly, Vanderbilt's starting to play much better against the spread than you might realize. They've covered 2 consecutive games, last week against Kentucky, Missouri before that. Think about them on the road this year, 21-20 against South Carolina. That's 3 of the last 4 games that Vanderbilt's covered thus far this season. Covered the spread against UConn before that. That's, what is that, 4 of the last?
They did not cover against UConn.
I'm sorry, yeah, they were 17.5 point favorite. But 3 of the last 4 they've covered. Outright win against UConn is what I should say there. And over the course of the last couple of years, the one thing that continues to play out over and over again is Vanderbilt's not a very good underdog at home, but they're an okay underdog on the road. But the big thing here is, and this is the only thing that really matters to me, I'm just not taking Ole Miss minus 36.5 points. I'm just not doing it. Ole Miss has turned out to be a pretty good team. This is a gigantic number. This is a simple pass for me. It's Vanderbilt or nothing. The game dictates we must pick the game. So therefore I'll take Vandy plus the plus the 30-plus points here. But keep in mind, Vandy has now covered in 3 of its last 4 games. So give me the Commodores. Flow, though, on the side of Ole Miss. Or you want to go with the flow and take Ole Miss?
This is a tricky one. I mean, this is a massive number. Question is how many of these Ole Miss players and who are going to get rested? I mean, when does Lane Kiffin just like green light Matt Corral to just say, go put up, Heisman stat numbers and like get whatever you can and throw for 7 touchdowns? Or does he like just cut him off in the second quarter or halftime? I think if he played the full game and I knew that, I think they cover this number. But I think they're probably going to get some rest, and I can see Vandy kind of squeak into 20 points. I don't know if Ole Miss gets in the 60s. So I'll take Vandy plus the points here.
So that will do it for us for SEC play here today. We'll get ready to turn our attention to top 25 games outside the Southeastern Conference here in a moment. Quick reminder, though, it's Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, and a quick thank you to our friends at R.S. Andrews for allowing us to do this fun show each and every week, making our picks and sharing some thoughts about games against the spread. That's what Go with the Flow is all about, and R.S. Andrews makes that possible. But as much as Dari knows about picking games, trust me, he and the entire team over there at R.S. Andrews knows so much more about how to leave you with a smile for any of your air conditioning, heating, your plumbing, your electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. They have been delivering smile story after story, year after year. They can do the same thing for you, the same way they have for so many of the folks here in our Dog Nation audience. So make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Check them out there today. Fascinating game in the Big Ten. We've got some fun Big Ten games down the stretch here this year. And this is maybe the first of what we'll be talking about over the course of the next couple of weeks as Ohio State gets ready to host Michigan State. Michigan State, one of the most impressive stories here this year. Mel Tucker taking a band of transfers and being in the Big Ten race all season long, and a fixture in the top 10 of the college football playoff rankings. Of course, Ohio State, though, the team then would appear to be the favorite to eventually win this league and make the college football playoff. Yet at times, they've had a hard time showing themselves to be that caliber of team. Did cover the spread a week ago against Purdue, but once again gave up some garbage points late to make that one seem a little closer than otherwise would have been. Can they meet the standard of being impressive, though, against Michigan State on Saturday, or does Mel Tucker have one more magic trick up his sleeves here? Ohio State hosting Michigan State as a 19-point favorite. Big game in the Big Ten East. Mike, what do you think about it?
Yeah, Michigan State isn't that good. They really aren't as good as their record. They really aren't as good as their rank. They don't hold it. To me, if I put them under the microscope, they really don't hold up as a top 10 team. They really aren't as good as the results. But at some point, you got to give credit where credit's due. You can still think they're not good, but you got to give them credit. And I give them credit enough to think that they're going to cover the spread. I've seen a game there. I watched Ezekiel Elliott get shut down under 34 yards. Michael Thomas was a part of that offense. And Michigan State was playing with literally their third-team quarterback. There's a lot of kids from Ohio on the Spartans roster. Where Michigan State's at right now, I think they're still engaged. And so I'm going to go with Michigan State to cover, but definitely, they got no shot at winning this game. They're not that good, but they'll cover this week.
Big number in the Big Ten East. Jeff Sentell, what do you think?
Yeah, big number. That kind of adds some trepidation to my pick here. I think Michigan State's going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to score, but they're not going to be able to score with Ohio State. Don't have a lot of confidence points right now in the Ohio State defense at all in terms of trying to hold back those Spartans and the Fighting Mel Tuckers for at least a couple more games. I'm going to take the points here, and I'm going to go with Michigan State in this one. I'm sure Ohio State will put up like 600 yards on them and everything else, but I think that Michigan State can skate to about 24 points.
Connor, what do you think here? A little bit of love for the underdog right now.
Yeah, and to prevent, last week we all were on Oklahoma, and that pretty clearly proved to be the wrong play there. I don't feel great about this, and I picked against them last week using a lot of the same logic that Mike and Jeff just used, and we were wrong on that. So give me Ohio State here minus 18. I think they sense they can make a statement with this win this week. And if they do beat Michigan State and they do it in a convincing fashion, I think they're going to leapfrog Oregon in the college football playoff rankings. So give me Ohio State minus 18.
Good to see Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers supporting the old defensive coordinator Mel Tucker, 52% on the side of Sparty here. And I agree with Connor that this is Ohio State's opportunity to try to make a statement. I believe the Buckeyes want to. The same thing I said about Alabama a little earlier. I'm just not quite so sure how capable of doing that they are. If this game was earlier in the season, maybe Michigan State plays it as a way of keeping it close. I think we do see more coaches coaching with the point spread in mind, and maybe an undermanned Michigan State team coaches a game like this in a way of just trying to keep it as close as possible. Late in the season, Michigan State's got a lot to play for. Maybe they take some risk, try to win the game that open up Ohio State for the cover. That's a possibility here. I'm grasping at straws a little bit on this. On the one hand, Ohio State feels like a square team minus such a big number. But on the other hand, Michigan State feels a little bit like a square dog, which you can also get there as well. But I'm going to trust that running game for the Spartans here a little bit. I'm going to take Michigan State plus the 19. I would not recommend anybody tail me on this really at all. But I'm going to take Michigan State plus the 19 here, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Sparty?
Yeah, I like Michigan State. I think this number's too thick. 19 points, almost 3 touchdowns. I think the Spartans can keep this within less than 2 scores. That running game is really the key for them to even have a chance of doing it. So I think they do need to slow the game down, kind of control that clock. That's how they beat Michigan. That's how you beat Ohio State.
So that is what's going to happen in the Big Ten. How about in the Pac-12, where we also have a rare top 25 matchup, especially this late in the season, as the Oregon Ducks have to go to Salt Lake City, a place that's been tough on them before. And, of course, over the years, certainly the Utes have been tough on a lot of folks there in that stadium. They stand as a 3-point home favorite against an Oregon team that's still ranked in the top 4 of the college football playoff, top 25, with its sights set on a trip to the college football playoff. But you got to be careful here as a small underdog on the road. Mike Griffith, what do you think about Utah, 3-point favorite, hosting Oregon?
Yeah, Oregon hasn't played in Salt Lake City since 2018, but I just don't think Rice-Eccles Stadium is everything that it's quacked up to be. So I like Oregon and whatever uniform combination they put out there. This is a team that beat Ohio State that we just got done drooling all over in Columbus in a noon kickoff, now back in a time zone closer to Eugene. I'm going to take the Ducks. They can smell the playoffs. The Pac-12 needs to have a team in the playoffs. College football needs a team in the playoffs, and somehow strange things happen when they really need to happen. So I'm going to take Oregon to win and cover the spread.
Jeff, what do you think? Oregon, small underdog on the road here.
Yeah, I got to go with an echo pick on this one. I think Oregon has a lot to gain. I think they have a lot to gain to get solidly in the college football playoffs. I just don't. This is more of a dig on Utah. I know they're a home favorite, but you look at that schedule and Utah with losses to San Diego State, BYU, Oregon State, losing 2 out of their first 3 games of the year. That convinces me that even though they're the first in the Pac-12 South right now, that I don't think they're all that. Consequently, give me Oregon here. Give me Oregon to win the game, especially with the 3 points.
In fairness, though, I don't know that I would call any of those embarrassing losses. Oregon State played better football for a while. BYU's ranked, and San Diego State's been one of the better group of 5 teams thus far this season. But nonetheless, there's a reason why Utah's only ranked in the bottom part of the top 25 and not higher than that. Connor Riley, what do you think here?
Well, I was already leaning Utah because they're not going to be intimidated by Oregon and the physicality that they bring. And then with Mike and Jeff both jumping on Oregon, makes me feel all the better in the world about taking Utah here. Jeff brings up the losses to San Diego State and to BYU. You point out those are 2 really good non-Power 5 teams. Those games were played on September 11th and September 18th, both away from Utah, I believe. So give me the Utes here. I think there's been too much normalcy at the top of the college football playoff rankings. And so I think this week we're going to see a big upset and Utah take down Oregon, even though it is not a point spread upset.
Of course, a huge faction of the LDS community would like to reach out to you about calling BYU a non-Power 5 team. They don't like to be thought of that way, even though they're officially not in a conference, but I know the point that you're making there. Listen, here's as simple as it gets for me. I think Kyle Whittingham's a terrific coach, and I think that Utah is a well-coached, tough team to beat each and every year. If this game is close at all, they're not getting a single call in this game because they've seen Oregon kind of cough it up late in the year. They've seen Utah be a threat in that regard before. There's a brand new commissioner in the Pac-12. He comes from the Vegas casino world. We know what the idea of a tight slot machine is. We know the fact that a lot of those table games, some of those Vegas casinos aren't exactly hemorrhaging money. A lot of folks don't walk out of there with money. This particular case, I'm guessing the chips fall right, the cards fall right for Oregon here in this spot. Unless Utah can just really run away with it where an officiating call doesn't matter, there's no way a late call goes against the Ducks here in this spot. It's just not going to happen. And I also think that Oregon's been a pretty good team. Certainly they do it well on the defensive side. It's a pretty physical football team, more physical than I think a lot of folks realize coming out of the Pac-12. So I'll take Oregon plus the points here because I'm just a little suspicious of how this game might be handled there late in that spot. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Ducks?
I'll take the Ducks. Both these offenses like to score points, so this should be a really entertaining game to watch. But I lean Oregon in this one, and getting the points is just a bonus.
Yeah, so that is that. Our final game to pick is not technically a top 25 game. It seems too fun not to pick. It's Wake Forest, who's been a hot team in the ACC all season long, really an unstoppable offense, takes on a classic defense here in Clemson. Of course, Clemson, we all remember from week 1 against Georgia, losing that game and really reeling as a program since then, trying to pick up the pieces here at home as a 4.5-point favorite against Wake Forest. I think it's a fun game, and Tigers are favorite here. Mike, what do you think about Clemson minus the 4.5?
Yeah, I'm sold on Dabo Swinney. I think he's a great football coach. I think this has been a tough season for Clemson. The quarterback situation hasn't worked out. You know, you don't need great play at quarterback to win, but you need to be efficient. And the offense at Clemson has been caught up to. I think people know exactly what Tony Elliott's doing. I think Clemson needs to evolve. But I think they've got enough heart and soul to win this final home game of the season. It is a very much a family environment there. And I think all that love and affection for one another in the emotional senior day ceremonies will carry over, and they'll beat this tremendous Wake Forest team.
So that is that. Jeff Sentell, how about for you?
Yeah, I think looking at this one, what is this? The over-under here probably is gargantuan between these two teams. Both teams will be expected to score a lot of points. When it kind of gets late in the fourth quarter, I look at Clemson's defense. Clemson's defense, for all their warts and for all the guys and missing pieces and 5 stars, I think they're still right around the top 5, top 8 defense in the country, allowing less than 15, 16 points per game. I probably spent a lot more time than Jeff Sentell in 2020 would have ever expect anyone to pick a Wake Forest Clemson game here with this one. But I'm gonna take Clemson in this one. I'm gonna lay the 4.5. I think Clemson gets this done.
So a little bit of Clemson love there thus far. What do you think about that, Connor?
Give me Wake. I wish I had the guts to take them last week. I think they're going to be able to score. By the way, this Clemson team, no Justin Ross this week. I know the Wake defense isn't all that great, but this Clemson offense is just stuck in mediocrity, stuck in the mud. And I do think this Wake Forest offense is going to challenge Clemson's defense enough and mitigate the impact that this defensive line would have and find a way to score some points in this game and not just potentially cover, but outright win on senior day down there in Clemson, South Carolina.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers on the side of Wake Forest here, 63% like that high-powered Demon Deacons offense. And, you know, you look at the overall numbers for Wake offensively, it's actually really quite amazing, what they've been able to do. Haven't scored fewer than, I think, 35 points all season long. They're averaging 45 on the season. This is, from a scoring standpoint, there are a few teams in the country that do it more effortlessly and consistently than what Wake Forest does. And they've obviously been winning games all season long, but they're not exactly great against the spread, just 5-5 against the number here this year. The other thing I can't quite shake on this is, even though it's a contrast of styles, Clemson, the more defensive-oriented team, Wake Forest obviously as offensive-oriented as any team in the country is. It's also a big game with some implications here, and Clemson's just more comfortable, I believe, in big game spots. 4.5 is a little bit of a surprising number because I think for most people, they see Wake as having been the better team, but Clemson's the point spread favorite here. I say it all the time. When you see a game like this with this kind of surprising spread, usually the folks at BetUS or whoever's setting the line, they kind of know something. So, maybe this is for me the moment when like the Cinderella type season kind of comes to an end against Clemson, a team that's comfortable playing in big games against a Wake team that while they've scored plenty of points, they have not always handled their business on the ATS side of things. So I'll take Clemson here as the favorite here at home. That puts the flow on the side of Clemson. Or you want to go with the flow and take Clemson?
Yeah, even though 4.5 seems like a lot, I'm going to take Clemson here at home. I've been a fan of Wake's team all year, but I like Clemson's defense at home for their final home game. It's on a grass field, so that'll slow Wake down a bit. And what better for a struggling offense to play than Wake Forest defense? I think they're going to get enough momentum going. This line is dropping, so money has been coming in on Wake.
Okay.
I think it's down to 3 now.
Okay.
You may be able to find it at 2.5 before kickoff.
We should point out, Dart, I don't mean to cut you off, but just for the folks to understand, we record this show during the week. It airs on Friday. So there is typically some line movement ahead of when we pick these games. So folks should obviously do their own research and do their own shopping to get the best price available to them for the side they want to be on. But go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah. So, I mean, you may be able to get this under 3, but I do like Clemson at home to close out the season on a positive note, getting a big win against a really good Wake team who I've been a fan of all year.
Dar, here's also kind of a weird thing for me. I'm a little bit contrarian on this, that if the line is more narrow, I actually like Wake Forest a little more. That's not the way you think it should go. But the fact that line makers, odds makers at the beginning of the week like Clemson enough here to make them the sizable favorite, well ahead of the key number of 3, that's enough confidence for me to kind of ride that steam here a little bit. Where if it's a more narrow point spread, maybe the Wake Forest offense kind of clouds my judgment back there again. But the fact that early in the week there was this much respect for Clemson, despite the fact the in-season results would suggest otherwise, I don't know. I kind of take something out of that.
I kind of look at some of that stuff too, but I'm kind of on Mike's wavelength here with what he said at the beginning. This is there's going to be a lot of motion here for Clemson in this game. And I just think, that talent is going to rise up and that team is going to show up for this last home game. I think they are going to end the note. I think Dabo knows that. It's a big positive going into next year, going into recruiting. I mean, everything behind you is kind of behind you, and this is what's in front of you. And we're a family, and we're gonna die together on this battlefield. I think they're gonna rise up for this game.
I think you're right about that. I think if you're easily picking Wake Forest here, then you're essentially saying that you no longer view the Clemson program as really the national factor it once was. They're clearly not a playoff team this year, but do you think they've exited the stage? If you're making an easy pick of Wake Forest, to me, that's almost what that suggests there. So this is actually one of the more intriguing games of this Saturday for reasons beyond just the contrast in styles between the two teams right now. Whatever your picks are here for this week, hope they do well, and hopefully we'll have some more winners to celebrate when we return back next week. Obviously, rivalry week the next time we get together, some real fun ones, and we have to pick the Egg Bowl, even though the next time we do this show, it's going to air after the Egg Bowl is already played. So we'll have to finagle that somehow, some way. We haven't had a lot of big Thursday night games here this year, but getting ready for next week, we'll have to pick a game for our purposes that will have already been played by the time our audience watches the show. Because if I'm picking games next week, you better believe I'm picking the Egg Bowl, because there's no rivalry game I enjoy more than that one to close out the regular season. So we'll do that then. Go ahead and enjoy the calm before that storm here this week. And as we said before, best of luck with all your picks. Thanks for being here as a part of Go With The Flow, presented by RS Andrews. And we will look forward to seeing you again next time.